What we call depression is rarely driven by one thing. It's very often a reflection of what's happening inside our physical body, inside our mind, and inside our soul. So many women in their 40s and their 50s will enter into these years and they'll suddenly feel like they're broken. They may be experiencing depression for the very first time in their entire lives. They might think something is really wrong with me. I am losing my mind. I've lost myself. But oftentimes it's just that the hormones that have had once really helped keep them stabilized and stabilize their mood, they're shifting and they're feeling it and they're just really sensitive to it. Depression's been a thread that has run through so much of my life, both personally and professionally and generationally. And for years, I thought that it was something that I would have to manage in myself forever, forever. I struggled with mood swings. I struggled with ups and downs. I would spiral really hard into some dark places. And alongside of that, I grew up watching my mom struggle. My mom struggled from the time that I was young, but it really got bad for my mom as she was getting closer to midlife. And then in midlife was when she really, really was battling depression. And I witnessed that. And in myself, it was in college that I started struggling with suicidal ideation, with some dark, dark places that I would go to in my mind, and I would beat myself up. I was a fighter. I was someone who, on the outside, always wanted to make sure that I had it all together, that other people would perceive me as being a high achiever. Again, just someone who had all their crap together. And on the inside, I was feeling like I was breaking down and breaking down mentally and emotionally. And I didn't know what to do with that. So in college, I did go on campus to this student health center. They assigned me a therapist. She recommended that I go on an antidepressant, and I did go on an antidepressant. And the one particular antidepressant that I went on at that time is known to actually make suicidal thoughts worse sometimes as a side effect. And I did have that side effect. So I didn't stay on that particular brand for very long because I got suicidal and it was really scary and it was really dark. So for a couple more years, I would just battle and I was in therapy. I had a lot of other physical things going on in my body too. And I can look back today and I understand the dynamic so much better. I understand it through all the different lenses and I can see that my gut was a mess. And we're going to talk about the gut brain connection in a minute. I can see that I probably wasn't even making good neurotransmitters, that I didn't even have the cofactors needed to make them. I didn't have healthy gut to make them. I was on other medications that had side effects that were impacting my mood on top of all of the emotional things too. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was seeking answers and seeking help in a system that was very, very limited. And my seeking today over decades, I'm 50 now. And again, this struggle for me started when I was 19. So, what are we talking? 30 years here, 30 years of looking at all the different angles and digging really pretty darn deep to understand my moods and understand how to help myself feel good and feel really good. And what I have come to understand is that depression, or what we call depression, I'm going to say that too. What we call depression is rarely driven by one thing. It's almost never driven by one thing. It's very often a reflection of what's happening inside our physical body, inside our mind, and inside our soul. So that's why an integrative approach and understanding the different drivers of depression is so important. And sometimes even our spiritual disconnection from the source of all life itself can be the biggest driver. And for me, as I came to understand myself really well, I came to understand how that was underneath all of the other things that I was experiencing, even when there were things that I was experiencing that were very physiological. But because I was so disconnected from source in that way of really receiving the unconditional love that was for me, of understanding that I didn't need to seek my worth and my validation in the world, but instead I was already worthy. I was already validated, that God was inside of me. And from that place, receiving unconditional love, loving myself from that I could regulate my nervous system. And when my nervous system was regulated, I wouldn't constantly be beating up my gut, so to speak, and creating more and more inflammation in my body, which led to a dysfunctional gut brain connection, which leads me to the first lens that I want to talk about with you, because I think it is important for us to understand that functional and physiological lens when we're talking about, again, what we call depression. So 90 to 95% of serotonin and other neurotransmitters as well, they're made in our gut. So you can imagine that if your gut is not optimally healthy and we've got, say, some leaky gut because we've got food sensitivities, we're consuming foods that are really processed, we're consuming glyphosate, which is heavily sprayed on our corn, wheat, oat crops here in America. So that's compromising the gut. We've got a lot of mental and emotional stress. We've got emotions that are trapped in the body. That's compromising the gut. We're living in fight or flight. We've got bacterial overgrowths. All of that can contribute to the neurotransmitters, the serotonin, specifically serotonin, not being properly formed and not being optimally produced in our gut itself. And the gut and the brain are connected. They're very strongly connected through the vagus nerve. So when our gut is inflamed, it's going to send a distress signal to the brain. So a lot of times people are struggling with emotional issues. They're struggling with brain fog, mood swings, anxiety, what we call depression. And it's really a gut issue. It's because we've got leaky gut, leaky gut, leaky brain. So when we have intestinal permeability and the intestinal permeability is increasing, it can trigger neural inflammation and it can alter the mood regulating chemistry. And we feel it. And I know personally from experiencing that, because I've had a lot of gut issues in my life, that when my gut has been inflamed, my mood is off. It doesn't feel good at all. I have felt like I was going crazy, losing my mind. And I've seen that in a lot of the clients that I've worked with over the years. On top of fatigue being one of the top complaints for the clients that have come here seeking support, brain fog is often one of them, and low moods, anxiety. A lot of my clients have struggled with anxiety, mood swings, whether they label it depression or just apathy or feeling blah or not like themselves. And when we take a deeper look, we have found dysbiosis, which is an imbalanced gut microbiome, which can lead to impaired production of serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. It can lead to symptoms of, again, anxiety, mood swings, emotional volatility, depression, feeling really low, blue. You can't stop crying. It's not fun. It is not fun. And for me personally, I used to think that for a long time, my moods were purely chemical. And I spent a long time focusing on that. And it was needed. It was needed. I couldn't ignore supporting my gut and expect my moods to improve. In my 20s, the only approach that I knew for my moods was therapy and going on an antidepressant. So outside of the antidepressant that I took when I was in college for a brief period of time, I did go on an antidepressant in my later 20s and I stayed on it for 11 years. For 11 years, I was on an antidepressant and I didn't know how to get off of it. And the only way that I knew how to approach dealing with my moods was to do in a very traditional therapeutic approach where I'd go to therapy. And that was helpful. And it was helpful for me, but it wasn't solving all my issues at all, at all. And as I stepped more and more into the world of holistic medicine and holistic healing, and I started coaching myself, I really began researching and understanding the connection between the gut and the brain. And when we have weak digestive fire, which I definitely had very weak digestive fire for a whole variety of reasons. When you have weak digestive fire, you're not absorbing your nutrients very well. So a lot of my nutrients, again, as I started digging deeper, were really low. So there's some key nutrients needed too for the whole biochemical process of even forming those neurotransmitters. So we need B6, we need B12, we need folate. Those are needed for methylation and serotonin dopamine synthesis. Really, really important. If we're really low on B6, and I was really, really low on B6, and I see that in a lot of my clients, especially my female clients, there's a need for B6. There's a condition called pyroluria that I myself had struggled with, and I've had a lot of clients over the years who went misdiagnosed and nobody was picking up that they had pyroluria. And so their B6 was really, really depleted and they were struggling with symptoms of depression, anxiety, ADD, lack of focus, and histamine issues too, because B6 is needed for so many different biochemical processes in the body. But specifically, again, talking today about depression, it's needed for serotonin and dopamine synthesis. So we may not even have the raw materials on board to make enough neurotransmitters. So we feel it. We're feeling it. We're not just losing our mind. And there's no amount of talk therapy that's going to address that. So that's important to take a look at. Other nutrients that are needed as building blocks for our moods as cofactors would be zinc, magnesium, iron. A lot of my female clients have struggled with really low iron, which impacts your thyroid. They have low iron because they might have a hormonal imbalance where they have estrogen dominance. Their periods are really heavy. They're bleeding out a lot every month. They're not able to replete enough. They might also, on top of it, have weak digestion, so they're not absorbing iron from their foods really, really well. And we need iron for good moods. Vitamin C, tyrosine, and tryptophan. Those are very important too. And we get those from our meat, but we have to be able to absorb really, really well. You could even supplement with amino acids, like perhaps you're even supplementing. And I did that for years after I got off antidepressants. But if you don't have the cofactor, like if you're taking 5-HTP or tryptophan and tyrosine, and you're not taking B6 or you're low in B6, you're not supporting that pathway to produce it. So I'm not sharing all of this so that your head is spinning. You don't need to know all of the details of this. This is what I help my clients super sleuth and do. But I want to help you really understand that there's more. There's so much more to the picture. And there's also so many other ways for you to address what's showing up for you symptomatically. So again, that label of depression, just think of that as a symptom. It's just another symptom. Like we might have symptoms of getting having migraines or having bloating or insomnia, right? Like those are all symptoms. Depression is another symptom. And we want to get underneath and look for the breakdown in function, and then get underneath the breakdown in function and look for where the cracks are in our functional foundations. So protein. So we need adequate amounts of protein in our diet because amino acids are the building blocks of neurotransmitters. So sometimes people are not consuming enough protein. I have worked with over the years vegetarians and vegans who were very low on the building blocks for their neurotransmitters, their amino acids, and it was affecting their mood. So there's ways that we can support that, but consuming adequate amounts of protein is really important, and also digesting them well. So if you have weak digestive fire, you have weak digestion, and you are consuming protein, it might not be properly digested. And that was another issue for me. That was something else that was going on for me. For people, chronic dieting, poor digestion, as I just mentioned, vegetarian diets, vegan diets, all of those can be contributing to limited amino acids. And you want to know that. So if you are choosing a vegetarian or a vegan diet, make sure that you are supporting amino acids properly. It's really important. Here's the deal. SSRIs do not create serotonin. I think a lot of people assume if they need to go on an antidepressant, specifically an SSRI antidepressant, that that's going to somehow supplement or give them the serotonin. No, it's just recycling what's already there. So let's put on our critical thinking hats. So if we don't have the raw materials on board and the cofactors to make the neurotransmitters, then what are we recycling? We're not really recycling proper amounts of serotonin. And that's why a lot of people need to increase their dose or go on a little cocktail of different antidepressants to see a positive shift. So if your body isn't producing enough neurotransmitters, taking an SSRI can actually feel like you're trying to pour from an empty cup. And it doesn't feel great. And it might help you to feel better for a short period of time. And SSRIs and antidepressants, they have their place. I'm not coming from a place of vilifying them. I just have never looked at them as being the answer, because I'm somebody who always asks why. I want to get to the root cause drivers of why we don't even have enough, or why are we depressed. I'm not interested in band-aiding. That's just not my approach. And I haven't seen band-aiding really work very well. Now, when someone is clinically extremely depressed and perhaps suicidal, can it help in the short term? Perhaps, yes. But we still want to be addressing all of these other things. You want to make sure that you're optimizing your gut health and digestion and having adequate amounts of amino acids on board, and making sure that you have the nutritional cofactors on board from a physiological lens. Because if we're not doing that, then what are we doing, right? We're not actually helping ourselves or other people. And I want to also point out something else when it comes to SSRIs and antidepressants. They thin the gut lining over time. So, since I've just shared with you all about the negative effects of having a compromised gut on our mood and on our serotonin production, now you're taking a medication that is thinning out the gut lining. So it's actually further compromising your production of neurotransmitters, of serotonin specifically. And it can also be contributing to gut inflammation that is contributing to brain inflammation. So they make it worse, which again is why people over time on antidepressants, they don't feel better. They feel worse. I have worked with a lot of clients over the years who've been on antidepressants, and they came to a place of realizing they're not helping them. They're not helping them anymore, or they never really did help them, and they want to get off of them. And if that's you, please know that I'm not giving you medical advice on this podcast. I'm educating you. So that's my disclaimer. So you want to work with your medical professional to properly wean off while you have other support in place in all of the other areas, right? You always want to wean from a medication from a place of strength. And so when I work with people, we are working with their doctors for a proper titration down schedule, a weaning off schedule, while we are also supporting them in all the other areas, mind, body, and spirit. We're supporting them oftentimes with amino acids as well, making sure we're optimizing gut health, making sure that they're sleeping really well. They've got really good practices in place. They've got good tools in their toolbox. They're emotionally aware. They're spiritually aware. So just sharing with you that it can be done. I actually myself was able to wean off successfully an antidepressant after 11 years. And I had come to a place where I didn't feel any better. Like I early on, maybe it helped me. It was a long time ago, but I remember thinking, I don't really think this is helping me anymore. But my titration off was very slow. So I slowly titrated off while adding in some amino acids and doing some gut health. And also, I was in therapy at the time. So that was really, really helpful for me. Another physiological consideration is when we are in midlife. So, for any of you who are in midlife, listen up. If you're not yet in midlife, just pay attention because this is important. As you've heard me share before on these podcasts, midlife can span about 15 years. So, as our progesterone starts to decline, we will lose some of that calming hormone. So, progesterone in and of itself is very calming. It helps GABA, which is our natural anti anxiety neurotransmitter. So we might feel a little bit more edgy, irritable, anxious as progesterone is declining. And then estrogen supports serotonin and dopamine production. So estrogen in the perimenopausal years starts to go all over the place. It's not stable anymore. So it's up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Sometimes, and I see this more and more in my younger women that I work with, I'm seeing a lower than optimal progesterone. And I think a lot of that has to do with our environment, our modern environment, a lot of the things that we're working against, the stress that we're under. I think it also has to do with the women becoming overly masculinized. It's like a whole other conversation, but I'm seeing progesterone production too low. And when we have progesterone production too low, what happens is it creates an estrogen dominant effect. So estrogen might be in ratio to the progesterone too high. So I can see this in my 30-year-old clients, my 35-year-old clients, my 25-year-old clients, and they're not yet in the perimenopausal years, but they are experiencing the dip in progesterone, which is leading to more anxiety, more irritability. They're not sleeping as well. Their periods are heavier. And then when we enter into the perimenopausal years, we're going to have those dips in estrogen that is going to pull on serotonin. Some people are not as sensitive to it. Some women get through the perimenopausal years, just like gliding into menopause without mood issues. That has not been me. That absolutely has not been me. I am someone who has been sensitive to all the things. So everything that I'm talking to you about today on this podcast, I have experienced. I have experienced the depression and mood swings from gut inflammation, from my weak digestion, lowering the cofactors needed to make serotonin, leaky gut, leaky brain, like all of it. And then came perimenopause. And I have felt every dip in my hormones. And I can tell you that you feel like you're losing your mind. There have been times where it has felt so dark for me as estrogen is dipping. And so in midlife, Again, we've got the progesterone and the estrogen that are declining, and it's a normal thing. We're not broken because our estrogen and our progesterone are declining. It's part of the normal aging process, but they can contribute to low mood, sleep disturbances, because we need adequate amounts of serotonin to make melatonin, which is the hormone that helps us to fall asleep and stay asleep. It can contribute to feelings of irritability, overwhelm, anxiety, a sense of losing yourself. And I definitely felt like I was losing myself. So many women in their 40s and their 50s will enter into these years and they'll suddenly feel like they're broken. They may be experiencing depression for the very first time in their entire lives. They might think something is really wrong with me. I am losing my mind. I've lost myself. But oftentimes it's just that the hormones that have had once really helped keep them stabilized and stabilize their mood, they're shifting and they're feeling it and they're just really sensitive to it. So once we understand that, we can begin to support the body healthfully instead of judging it and beating ourselves up for it. So, how can you do that naturally? Making sure at any age or stage, right? So, I'm not just addressing my midlife ladies. This is important for all of us, but midlife, especially, we want to make sure we're eating enough protein, moderate amounts of healthy fat. We don't want to go crazy on the healthy fats, but enough protein to support the hormone synthesis. That's really important. We also become more blood sugar sensitive as estrogen is declining, and blood sugar swings don't feel good either. That can contribute to mood swings and anxiety. So speaking of blood sugar, we want to make sure that that blood sugar is really stabilized, because the glucose spikes can really worsen those mood swings. So again, you're going to stabilize your blood sugar by eating enough protein and fiber, vegetables. I teach all of this in my Vibrant Rise Collective program and to all of my clients, really. We want to make sure that we're supporting our adrenal health. So chronic stress is going to steal, so to speak, progesterone. And remember, progesterone is our very calming hormone. So if we're under chronic amounts of stress, we're overworking ourselves, we are not regulating our nervous system, we don't have any practices in place, we're people pleasing, we have leaky boundaries. Go back to any one of my episodes, and all of them apply to stress management, truly, because it's all about surrendering, not feeding the egoic mind, and stepping into faith that is going to help to regulate our nervous system. But the HPA access, we become even more stress sensitive in midlife because our ovaries are checking out. And so we are more adrenal centric at this stage of life than ever before. So a lot of women will say, well, I used to be able to get up at 5 every day and work a 9 to 5 job and juggle the family and cook dinner and hit the gym and do all of these things. And what is wrong with me? I feel like I can't even handle a fraction of that at this season of my life. And there's truth to that, because you are more stress sensitive. That might not even have been serving you in that season of your life, but you got away with it because you had robust hormone production and you don't now. So, another consideration is bioidentical hormone therapy. That's been a game changer for me. I started with progesterone. Ah, I could sleep again. It was very, very calming for me. I brought on estrogen at the appropriate time in my 40s with support of my prescriber. And that really helped to stabilize things for me, my moods. I stopped with the up, down moods. Sometimes herbal adaptogens can help, targeted nutritional support with guidance of somebody who can really take a look at your unique body. Perhaps they do some functional testing. With all of my clients, I take a look at hair tissue mineral analysis, so I know what minerals they are in need of. I look at lab work. We get pretty comprehensive with the labs. You want to make sure that you're moving your body every single day, because exercise is going to boost your endorphins and it's going to also help support the brain derived neurotropic factor. So move every day. Research shows that even 30 minutes of walking a day is as effective as an antidepressant. I remember reading that a long time ago, and I thought, I can do that. I absolutely can do that. And for a while, my walking was how I was keeping my head above the water with my moods. When we go outside and we walk, I can't emphasize this enough. We are quieting our minds. We're getting away from the computer and the constant stimulation. We're outside in nature. When we're outside in nature in creation, we're connecting with the creator. We're moving. There's something about physically moving forward. A lot of times when we're struggling with our moods, we feel like we're moving through sludge. But if you can put your sneakers on and go walk and get the sunshine in your eyes, you are even metaphorically moving forward into the sun, into the light. So important. These are things that God created for us, for our sustenance, for our provision. So move your body. Exercise is a fantastic way to boost your mood. Even when you're in a really funky place, even when I get in a funky place, if I just make sure that I get my heart rate up, I get a sweat on, or at the very least, I just go for a gentle walk, I immediately feel better. I immediately feel better. So, all right, we've talked about the physiological considerations, and they're important. And if you need more support with any of those things, you can reach out to me. That's what I do. That's what I help people do. You can go back and listen to the podcast with Claudia Petrelli. She's a hormone specialist. She's a colleague of mine. She has a ton of resources out there as well on hormone replacement therapy. But now I want to take a look at the emotional and the psychological lens. Because again, I said at the beginning of this podcast, it's really important for us to look through all the different lenses. So, the inner critic. I personally had such a loud, mean inner critic. And I did a lot of work with my inner critic. And you've heard me here on this podcast talk about my mentor, Molly. And that is something that Molly and I really, really, really got into. And oftentimes there are these subconscious loops that we get into, and we have a really mean, bullying inner critic in our subconscious mind, and we don't even realize that it's there. And it develops its mean, bossy personality at a time in our lives when we thought we needed that inner critic. We thought we needed the bully to keep us in line. So for me, I was really stuck in a loop that I was not even aware of until I started to take a look at my thoughts, like really take inventory of my thoughts. And that's something that I did very intentionally and thoroughly in my work with Molly. There was a period where she had me write down every time I had a negative thought. I wrote it down. And it was so eye-opening to me how mean my inner language was. And where was that coming from? It was coming from my inner critic, my inner bully. And what I would do anytime that I felt less than or I screwed up, I had a very high bar for myself because that's how I thought I needed to keep myself in line and keep myself worthy in this world. And I would pull out this metaphorical baseball bat and beat the crap out of myself anytime that I thought that I failed in any way, shape, or form. I saw failure as really being just such like a fatal flaw of mine. I didn't see failure as a opportunity to learn and grow and mess up and gain wisdom because we learn through our failures. No, I avoided failing. And then when I did fail, I'd beat the crap out of myself. And then that would spiral me into the darkness. It would pull me into that place of a lot of negative self-talk. And so my negative self-talk was contributing to my dark moods. Our minds will often use self-punishment or self-blame as a misguided way to regain control. And for me, I did a lot of that. I actually started probably in college. I think it was in college when I really struggled for the very first time with darker depression, and I struggled with suicidal ideation. And suicidal ideation became for me a way of controlling what was happening. And it was also like a self punishing way of beating myself up. I actually never really, really wanted to die, but playing with the idea of ending my life became, in like a fantasy type of a way, it became a mental escape for me. And I would play with that thought. And that was not anything that I ever admitted to anybody except for Molly, because I had come to this place when I hired her in my life. And this is 6 years ago now, but when I hired her, I came to a place where I had hit my rock bottom. And if I was going to really, really start to look at the root cause drivers of why I wasn't feeling my best physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, then I had to start to be really, really honest with myself and honest with her. So for me, what I discovered was that it was a habit, and it was a habit that I formed really young because it felt like an escape, much like some people might have self punitive habits like in cutting, or they hurt themselves or they self sabotage themselves in other ways. But that was part of how I would beat myself up. And it would also be part of how I would escape the pain, the momentary pain of feeling so hopeless. So when we feel powerless and we're criticizing ourselves, it can feel good to do something about it. So that can be beating ourselves up, the self-deprecating language, the things that we say to ourselves. And again, for me, the SI playing around with suicidal ideation was part of that for me. Other people can have other self-sabotaging behaviors. Maybe they know that over drinking alcohol isn't good for them, but it momentarily numbs them out and it gives them an escape. But any of the ways that we're essentially beating ourselves up, it's only deepening the wound. It's only making it worse. And depression can often arise when the mind itself is at war with itself. Have you ever been in a mind war where you can't escape your own mind? You just want to get out of your own head. The thoughts in your head are so mean. You're going back and forth, you're battling, and you're so trapped. I mean, you're trapped between grief from the past. Maybe you've got shame. Maybe there's blame. You're beating yourself up. There's things in your past that you're battling and grappling with. And then you've got the fear of the future. And so you feel really stuck and you're at war and you can't escape it. It's horrible. I have so much compassion for anybody who's listening that has ever struggled with any of these things, or you still do struggle. I get it. If anybody ever knew my inner world, they would say, "Wow, Jen, you did a really good job keeping it all together on the outside." And I guess I did, but I held all of that in, and holding all of that in was literally eating me away from the inside out. And it kept me really physically ill and sick. And it wasn't until I started to feel brave enough to let it up and out and to step into humility and honesty and to talk about it, and to talk about it with someone who was very safe for me to talk to about it, and to take steps to change my thinking, to change the way that I approached how I was feeling, that I was able to have a different experience essentially. I'm talking about all of these things here with you. And again, I've experienced a lot of them, but they're not things that I experience today, which feels quite miraculous to me, because I thought that this was just something I was always going to battle, always. And a lot of these patterns, they are living in the subconscious mind. So the subconscious mind, you can think of the subconscious mind as being like the part of the iceberg underneath the water. It's the part that we can't see. And they're shaped by early conditioning, by traumatic events in our life, whether they're little T traumas or big T traumas, oftentimes shaped by unprocessed emotions. And many of us don't know what's in the subconscious mind because the amygdala in the brain won't let us get into the subconscious mind. And we could do a lot of therapy. And there's a lot of wonderful techniques for getting into the subconscious mind or for helping people address these things without even being in talk therapy, like EMDR, for instance. For me personally, I tried a lot of things, and I did bring some things from the subconscious mind into the conscious mind so that I could address them. But the things that were really stuck, the things that I couldn't access because my amygdala, my fear response was so loud, were things that I was finally able to access when I did MDMA guided therapy. So, past episodes, I've gone into that. So you can always go back to past episodes. But ultimately, we want to make sure that, again, when we're looking at the symptom of depression, we're making sure that we're looking for essentially cracks in the foundation of our overall well-being. So we're addressing our physiological health, which I've already covered. If we're in midlife, we're supporting the crazy all over the place declining hormones, because that's very, very real. But we're also really taking a look at our patterns of thinking, our conscious and subconscious beliefs, and where our minds might be at war. And then we want to take a look at the metaphysical and the spiritual lens, which, as you know, this is really where I dig deep. And in all of my years of journeying as a human being and being a seeker of truth, someone who has a growth mindset, who's always asking why, this really has been where I've landed as being like the deepest layer. And when we've got metaphysical issues going on and there's spiritual misalignment with our divine design, that's rippling out to everything else. So there's a call. I mean, there's really a call from the soul for awakening. And depression can oftentimes be a soul cry. It's a deep longing to return home to truth, to remember who we are, to step into true essence of self. We are created by our Creator out of love. We're created to be loved. And every single one of us has a core need, and that is to know that we're loved. It's not that our need is to be loved, because the truth is we are all loved unconditionally, but we all do not know that we're loved unconditionally. So many of us come in, and from an early age, there's all this conditioning that tells us otherwise. And the journey is to remember. It's to remember who we are before the world's told us who to be, right? So when we're living outside of our divine design, we're disconnected from our true essence. And when we're disconnected from our true essence, energy stagnates. And that energy is very heavy. It's very dense. You can probably feel it in yourself if you're really quiet and really still and you look for energetic stagnation, especially if you're struggling with your moods. You could feel it, right? The body and the mind respond with heaviness. They respond with apathy or despair when we're living outside of alignment with our divine design. And all of that, they are the invitations to realign. They're the invitations to come home, the invitations to step into truth, the invitations to stop feeding the egoic mind with our fearful, hopeless thoughts, stop beating ourselves up, to get back into faith, to step back into the divine mind of God that is within us. And many of us don't even know it's there. I thought that I was very connected to God my whole life. And it was a journey for me in realizing that I actually was incredibly disconnected because I was playing by the world's rules. And I had a lot of religious dogma, a lot that was damaging to me and very limiting to me. And it kept me in a cycle of beating myself up, feeling like I was this dirty sinner, not even understanding what sin really is, and feeling like I was never good enough. And so I was very religiously performative, which did nothing for my soul. That didn't do anything for me connecting with my divine design. I was just actually trying to please man and man's list of rules. It wasn't until I became brave enough to challenge a lot of the narratives that I was walking around with that were limiting to me, that were very heavy on my soul, and release what didn't serve and enter into a relationship with God inside of me, with Christ inside of me, embodying love, realizing, oh, wait a second, all that I need is inside of me. So, what is all this other stuff? Well, that can't possibly be from God. And so, one by one, layer by layer, I've been dissolving it. It is a journey, my friends. And that is why I started this podcast, actually. This podcast was birthed out of a lot of my own work so that I could share it with you. And maybe I could highlight some things that you're struggling with on your path and offer to you some answers, some light. You've got to find it for yourself, right? So even when we're talking about investigating what are the things that are pulling us out of our divine design, my story is my story. Your story is your story. So you want to investigate your story. You want to take a look at where you may be living outside of the way that God created you to live and created you to be. Do you know your purpose? Do you know that you were created on purpose for a divine purpose? Do you feel like you're living in that? Do you know who your true essence of self is? I used to not know who I was. I am a big journaler and I have all kinds of journals, but I have a prayer journal that I've kept for years and I flip in it often and I go back and I read some of my prayers. And some of my prayers were like, God, please help me to figure out with clarity who I am. Who am I? Who do you say I am? Who'd you create me to be? Not the world's, because I walked around with so many shoulds from the world. And by walking around with worldly shoulds, they became like anchors to my soul. And they were driving the heaviness. They were driving a lot of my own apathy and despair. And they became my invitations to realign. So I came to see that my depression that I was struggling with for so long wasn't a punishment. It was never a punishment. It was always a messenger. It was asking me to stop striving and to start surrendering, to stop trying to fix myself and remember who I already am in God. It's a journey that we get to go on. And that flip of the script for me in recognizing that my moods were actually divine invitations to take a look at all the things that I'm talking to you about here today. Again, it's very rarely one thing, but as you take a look at things and you start addressing and then you circle back, maybe you have to go back to some physiological things, you get clearer and clearer and clearer on what it is that is anchoring your soul down, what it is that is pulling at you. And it's really empowering. It's really, really empowering. And we can approach it with gratitude. I am so glad for the ways that God has invited me higher and higher and higher. The metaphysical, again, the metaphysical and the spiritual for me, that was the biggest invitation. Yes, working on my gut was awesome, but my gut actually didn't really heal and optimize, so to speak, until I got underneath where I was living outside of alignment, until I came home to myself. And again, you've heard me talk on the podcast, sprinkled throughout different episodes, and I have a whole full episode on MDMA. But after my mentor, Molly, died, and she was the one that I did the most intense work with on all of these things, mind, body, spirit, all of it. She was the only person that I ever, even not my husband, shared my deepest, darkest thoughts with. I was that ready to heal. I was going to put my pride aside, and I did put my pride aside and share with her. It took some time. I had to trust her. But after she died, I was struggling a lot with grief and some things that were still in the subconscious mind that we had not gotten to were there, and they were pulling really, really hard on me. And that's when I found MDMA. And for me, doing that in a guided journey setting, MDMA quieted the amygdala. And my amygdala, my fear response was loud. And it helps me to really safely access the subconscious memories, where I was programmed, a lot of the patterning. There were things, like were beliefs that were in my subconscious mind that I was not identifying. And it helps me to really see the roots of my depression, my despair, my grief. A lot of them were rooted in unworthiness and guilt, control, although I knew that I was a control freak. That was nothing new, but understanding where did it come from, and then really understanding, oh, wait, okay, so that's a construct of my mind. And if my mind constructed it, not based on truth, but based on, human conditioning, then I can deconstruct it. I can dissolve it. And I did. I began to really dissolve all of these things in love. It's not an overnight process. Every day I show up and I'm like, all right, what's here? What's getting in the way? What am I giving power to? What are the stories that I'm playing into and feeding that are not rooted and grounded in truth? Sometimes I feel stubborn, right? And I feed them a little bit and then I don't feel good. But I am so much more empowered and self-aware today. And I've really learned to choose faith over and over and over again, choose truth over and over and over again. And my friends, that is how we rewire our brain. It's one choice of love at a time. So if you're listening to all of this and you're like, okay, I'm seeing some areas where I'm being invited to work on, know that you can, one choice at a time, one thought at a time, one choice to do something different. All of it is going to rewire your brain. Always come from love. Remember, love is the only thing that's real. You can trust love because love is truth. We can trust truth, right? So when we do that, you will move forward and up, forward and up. And one day you will look back and a lot of the habits, the patterns that were showing up for you that were so pervasive, that felt like they ruled your life, they won't be there. That doesn't mean that every day is perfect and that you never ever have a blue day or you don't feel sad emotions or that you never feel depression again. But it won't rule you. It will not feel like this ball and chain that you have to drag around, that perhaps maybe it feels like right now, or maybe in the past it's felt like, but and you're fearful that that's going to come back again. So remember that depression is not just a chemical imbalance. It's a multi-layered communication of the body, the mind, and the spirit. And it's asking for attention, it's asking for compassion, and it's asking for truth. I want to invite you to stop labeling yourself as broken and instead start asking yourself, what is my body trying to tell me? What thoughts am I believing that may not be true? Where have I disconnected from my source? If you are identifying any areas where you have a need for change, I encourage you to seek integrative support, spiritual direction, Maybe that's functional support, functional testing, somatic therapies, holistic coaching. There are a whole plethora of support modalities out there. It's also what I do in my practice. I don't do everything under the sun. I will refer clients out if I see a specific need for specific modalities. But wherever you are in that journey, if you're really feeling an inspiration to dig in deeper, to do the thing, to lean in, reach out, find support. So if you've been living under the weight of depression and you've begun to believe that this is just who you are, like I did, please, please know that it's not true. You are not your diagnosis. You are not that label that was given to you. You are not your darkest thoughts. You are light. You are love, and you are being invited back into wholeness. One of the most powerful ways to begin shifting your energy and restoring peace is to calm your nervous system, because we can't receive light or truth when our nervous system is in survival mode. And this is exactly why I created the Calm and Receive free at-home micro retreat to help you quiet the noise and come back to your center. You can access that in the link here in the show notes. You just need to register and you'll have full access to the 4 parts of that micro retreat. It will give you a little taste, even if it's just for the few minutes that you're doing it, of what it is to step into calm and to receive the peace that your soul is longing for, to receive the love that your soul is longing for. And if you're ready to go deeper, if you're ready to really understand your body, your mind, your unique self and your soul, and really understand what those invitations are inviting you to, you can apply for a soul body discovery call. That link is also in the show notes. It's where you and I will hop on a call and we're going to explore your unique situation, what you're going through, and start mapping out your path to freedom. And we can talk about whether or not any of my programs or the ways that I work with people could bless you. I want to end us today in a prayer. Father, thank you so much for the breath that fills our lungs and for the light that lives within each and every one of us. God, I ask that you remind each and every listener here today that they're created in love, out of love, that they're not walking alone, that they're never alone. May your peace, which transcends all understanding, guard our hearts and our minds. Amen. Until next time, my friends, continue the daily surrendering, dropping the struggle, and stepping into the abundant life that God has for you. Thank you for joining me on the Daily Surrender. If today's episode spoke to you, I'd love to hear your reflections. Send me a message, share this with a friend, or leave a review. Or remember, true healing and freedom come when we let go, surrender, and trust that God's way is so much better than our way. Until next time, my friends, keep surrendering, keep rising, and keep walking in peace.